The sun dipped low behind the vineyard hills, casting soft gold across the rows of white chairs and flickering candles. A string quartet played something delicate and forgettable, but no one was listening. Everyone was watching Lacey. My son Milo had never looked so polished. His tuxedo fit him like it had been sewn onto his bones, and his eyes never left his bride. Lacey Beaumont, radiant, collected the very image of grace, glided between guests like she belonged to royalty. She greeted the mayor with the same warm smile she gave the bartender. Everyone, it seemed, adored her. I watched from the shade of the garden tent, sipping sparkling water and pretending not to count how many people had told me, "Your son married up." I smiled, nodded, played the role. But I'd only met Lacey 3 times before today, and something about her struck me as rehearsed. Not dishonest exactly, just polished. Too polished. Beside me, Nia stood on tiptoe, trying to spot the dessert table. Her flower crown had slipped to one side, and she looked like a mischievous nymph who'd wandered into the wrong storybook. "Grandma," she said, tugging gently on my sleeve. I leaned down. "She's lying." I blinked. "Who's lying?" "Sweetheart." Nia's eyes flicked to the far end of the garden, where Lacey was laughing with 2 older guests, one of whom she had just introduced as her uncle. I saw her. She kissed a man, Nia whispered, and he didn't call her Lacey. He called her Karina. The string quartet ended their song. I didn't hear the applause, where I asked my voice calm, though my chest was suddenly tight. By the vines, near the white bench with the broken arm, I was getting the petals with Aunt Elise. I looked back at Lacey. She was adjusting the boutonniere on Milo's lapel, her expression tender. Then, just for a second, her eyes swept the crowd and stopped on me. She smiled, and I smiled back, even as my blood ran cold. I reached for Nia's hand and gently squeezed it. We would start with the vines. Back in the guest house, I sat beside Nia on the small balcony overlooking the lower vineyard. The party lights shimmered across the lawn below like a net of golden fireflies. The air smelled of lavender wine and something artificial hairspray or illusion I couldn't quite tell. I handed Nia a sheet of paper from her drawing pad and a box of crayons. "Can you show me what you saw? Honey, take your time." She knotted her brows, scrunched in quiet determination. Her little fingers moved with surprising certainty, outlining a crooked bench, a woman in a flowing white dress, and a tall man in dark clothes. She drew a red heart between them, then furiously scribbled over it. He was leaning close. She kissed him. And then he said, "Karina, we have to be careful." My throat tightened. "You're sure that's what he called her?" Nia didn't even look up. "I'm sure." I thought maybe he got her name wrong. But she didn't correct him. She just laughed. I tucked the drawing into my handbag and kissed the top of her head. "You did so good, baby. Thank you." Just before sunset, I returned to the path near the bench. I took off my heels and walked slowly through the gravel and vine rows, pretending to enjoy the breeze, but my eyes scanned for anything out of place. Down the sloped drive, near the garden wall, a man in a dark suit ducked into a black sedan with out-of-state plates. He glanced over his shoulder before pulling away. His face was unreadable, but something about him felt rehearsed too, like he was playing the part of a forgettable guest. When I rejoined the reception, Lacey was seated with my son, smiling sweetly as if nothing had happened. Her makeup still perfect, her posture serene. "Where did you disappear to earlier?" I asked casually as I passed behind her. She turned too quickly. "Oh, just a call from my cousin. Wedding day jitters." She needed calming down. Her voice was honeyed, but it didn't reach her eyes. Later that evening, I saw her slip a green-cased phone into her clutch. Funny, that morning it had been red. The next morning, over the scent of warm croissants and the clinking of mimosas, I made a quiet habit of watching Lacey work the room. She was extraordinary in the way performers are. She remembered names perfectly. She called my sister Iris, the one with the hummingbird tattoos, before Iris had even spoken. She asked our neighbor from Portland about her new garden fence, which no one had mentioned since Easter. It was impressive, almost too tailored. Have you met her parents? I asked Milo casually as we walked through the rose arbor toward the brunch tables. Briefly, he said, they're quiet, private, mostly collectors, based in Paris, now always traveling for art acquisitions. She told me they don't like the spotlight. I hummed, and yet they haven't spoken to anyone all weekend. They're introverts, Mom. He smiled without looking at me. Not everyone needs to make conversation to be present. At the brunch, Lacey pulled up a chair beside Thomas, my ex-husband Milo's father. She laughed at his jokes, asked about renewable energy credits, and dropped buzzwords like she was interviewing for a position in his firm. When Thomas mentioned a proprietary analytics model his firm used internally, she nodded like she already understood its mechanics. My ears perked. That model wasn't public knowledge. Not even Milo would know the details, and Lacey certainly shouldn't. Later that evening, after everyone had filtered off to rest before the welcome dinner, I lay on the bed with Nia helping her braid her hair. She paused mid-plait, tilting her head toward the open window. Shh, she whispered. Listen. I heard Lacey's voice just beyond the balcony. Her tone was colder than I'd ever heard it. He's almost ready. We'll move after the signing. Just stay in your role until I give the word. A pause. No mistakes. Not this time. I sat frozen heart thudding in my throat until her footsteps faded down the stone path. The hairbrush was still in my hand. Nia stared at me wide-eyed. She didn't sound like herself, Grandma. No, I thought, because maybe she wasn't. That afternoon, Nia asked if I'd help her find her sketch pad. She said she left it in the guest cottage during the morning hair trials. The staff had been rotating rooms, fluffing pillows, and folding robes, so I slipped off my heels and padded through the back entrance to look myself. The guest cottage was quiet sun filtering through gauzy curtains. On the vanity sat a closed leather planner, monogrammed, stylish, unmistakably Lacey's. I hesitated. I didn't open it. I didn't have to. A folded paper had been hastily shoved between its pages and was now half slipping out onto the floor. When I picked it up, my fingers instantly registered the thermal ink of a rental receipt. I expected it to say San Francisco or Paris, but the bold heading read Nevada Airport Rentals, Las Vegas branch, 3 days ago. I swallowed, turning to the line that listed the renter's name, Neves Cara. For a moment, the air thickened. My ears rang slightly. I knew that name. I didn't know how or from where yet, but the sound of it hit something in the back of my mind like a drawer I hadn't opened in years. I slipped the receipt into my handbag and called Nia to let her know I'd bring the sketchpad later. My legs didn't feel steady. Back in my room, I powered up my tablet and searched the name. Cara Neves, Las Vegas, wedding. Within seconds, the headlines blinked back at me. Las Vegas man claims wife. Drained accounts vanished with false identity. Cara Neves linked to suspicious marriage license case dropped after settlement. Repeat wedding fraud suspected. A grainy photo accompanied the article. Darker hair, lighter makeup, but the eyes were unmistakable. Lacey Beaumont was not who she claimed to be, and this wasn't her first time dressing in white with lies stitched into the seams. I stared at the screen, heart hammering. My fingers curled tightly around the edges of the receipt. There was no question anymore. She had a plan, and my son was standing right in the middle of it. I didn't sleep that night. I kept the lights low, the curtains drawn, and sat on the edge of the bed with my phone in hand. At 6:12 a.m., I finally dialed Gracelyn. She picked up on the third ring, her voice groggy. Del, you okay? Sorry to call so early. I whispered, but I need a favor, a legal one. Gracelyn had been our next-door neighbor for almost 20 years, a retired paralegal who'd forgotten more about civil court than most lawyers ever learn. I gave her the name, Cara Neves. Then I sent the Las Vegas receipt and the photo from the article. She didn't ask why. She just said, give me a few hours. By late morning, she called back. She was part of a civil case 2 years ago. Gracelyn said, her tone clipped, filed by a man named Theodore Raines, 78, retired shipping executive. Married her in Vegas after knowing her for 6 weeks. Claimed she emptied several accounts and vanished. Case was dropped after an undisclosed settlement. My stomach turned. Any jail time, number civil, not criminal. But here's the thing. The plaintiff dropped it just days after her lawyer suddenly resigned, likely pressured. There's more Delphina. I pulled side-by-side photos. She texted them to me. The hair was shorter, in one dyed ash brown. In the other, she wore heavy eye makeup and a red dress. But the smile was the same, half charming, half calculating. That's her, I murmured. That's Lacey. That afternoon, I joined the family for a light lunch on the patio. The sky was overcast, but spirits were high. Lacey had just finished telling a joke about her so-called art school days. Milo turned to me beaming. I've decided, he said, I'm giving her 40% of the equity in the company as a wedding gift. She's been helping me strategize the next round of expansion. She gets it, really gets it. I felt the breath leave my chest. Lacey touched his arm, smiling as if she hadn't just driven a knife into mine. That night, I asked Nia to sit with me again. We had more drawings to make. I stood at the window, long after midnight, watching the reflection of the vineyard lights stretch across the glass. My thoughts tangled into each other, the photo comparisons, the Las Vegas receipt, the name Kara Neves repeating in my head like a ticking clock. Milo's words haunted me most. She gets it, really gets it. He had no idea how close he was to handing his future to a stranger. I wanted to run to him, to shout the truth. But what if I was wrong? Or worse, what if I was right, and he refused to believe me? Nia's soft knock interrupted my spiral. She tiptoed into my room, clutching another piece of folded paper. I drew what I saw earlier, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I unfolded it and sat down slowly. She had drawn the same garden path from 2 nights ago, the broken bench, the creeping vines. But this time, the woman in the white dress was facing a tall man in a black suit. Between them, Nia had sketched a folder with what looked like green dollar signs tumbling out of it. He gave her something. She gave him that, Nia said. Then he left in the dark car. My hands trembled slightly as I set the picture on the nightstand. Nia, I said gently, would you mind if I kept this one too? She nodded and climbed into bed without another word. I waited until morning, then called Gracelyn again. There's a man, I said. Tall, dark suit seen with her just before the ceremony. Can you look into her associates, anyone she's been linked to, in the past? Gracelyn's reply came just before brunch. There's one name that pops up more than once. Dante Joran, mid-40s con artist turned consultant. Connected to at least 3 questionable startups and a fake nonprofit. No convictions, but he's always close when the money goes missing. I thought back to the man in the black sedan. I hadn't seen his face clearly, but I remembered how deliberately he had moved, like someone who knew exactly where the cameras were and how to stay just outside their reach. I closed my phone and walked outside, the drawing still folded in my pocket. It was time to start building a plan. I found Milo in the olive grove behind the reception tent alone with a cup of coffee and a tired look in his eyes. The morning fog still clung to the lower hills, and for a moment I almost backed away. But this couldn't wait. I need to talk to you, I said, my voice steady, despite the tremble in my chest. He looked up wary. What is it, Mom? I sat down beside him, pulled the folded receipt from my bag, then the printed articles, then Nia's drawings. The bench, the man in black, the folder. I laid them all on the table between us. Milo frowned, scanning each page in silence. She's not who she says she is, Milo. Her name is Kara Neves. She's done this before. His shoulders stiffened. Are you kidding me with this? I wish I were. He stood suddenly, eyes flashing. You've always had a problem with women I date. Always looking for what's wrong. This is another sabotage. I didn't go looking, I said quietly. But the truth showed up anyway. He turned away, hands on his hips, breathing hard. Then slowly, he returned to the table. His fingers brushed the corner of the photo comparison, the one with Lacey, in red, laughing at a camera 2 years before she ever met him. "What is this folder she's giving him?" he asked, voice lower now. "She's not working alone. A man possibly named Dante Joran was here during the reception. I believe they're planning something financial." He ran a hand through his hair, eyes unfocused. He swallowed. "I need to be sure." "Then let's be sure," I said. "We do this right." Together, we made the plan. I would invite Lacey to a quiet tea, just us, a symbolic family blessing, nothing threatening. Meanwhile, Graceland would loop in her contact, a retired cybersecurity specialist named Wendell Roth, to check Thomas's digital records for breaches or unauthorized access. If Lacey was already moving against us, we had to catch her before she took the final step. Milo looked at me, truly looked, and for the first time that weekend, I saw fear behind his anger. He nodded. "Let's find out who she really is." I arranged the tea table myself, lemon balm from the garden shortbread I'd baked before the trip, my grandmother's porcelain set. Everything was intentionally soft, domestic, familiar. Lacey arrived a few minutes late, glowing as always, her voice lilting with sweet tones as she complimented the setting. "This is so thoughtful, Delphina," she said, brushing her fingers over the rim of the cup I handed her. "I've always wanted a real moment with just us." I smiled. "So have I." We sipped in silence for a few minutes. Then, as I set my cup down, I tilted my head and said, "I'm curious. Do you prefer Lacey, or do you still go by Karen Eves?" Her hand paused midair. The teacup hovered, trembling slightly. Her eyes didn't blink. "Excuse me," she said softly. I leaned back, calm. Las Vegas, Theodore Raines, a vanished trust, settled quietly after some rather unfortunate accusations. For a moment she didn't move. Then, just as I saw the mask begin to shift, the door opened behind her. Milo stepped in, expression unreadable. In his hands were the printouts, court records, photos, a copy of a driver's license with the name Kara E. Neves and a familiar face. Alongside it, Wendell's report system access from an unrecognized device on my ex-husband's portfolio. "We know," he said quietly, "about everything." Lacey's smile returned sharper now. "This is ridiculous," she said, laughing lightly. "You Googled a stranger and think it's me. That's not evidence." Milo laid the papers on the table. Multiple names, multiple men, patterns, withdrawals, transfers. "And that man, you were seen with Dante Joran. We know what you're doing." She set her cup down. The charm faded. "You can't prove theft," she said flatly. "Your father signed the equity transfer, voluntarily. The courts won't care if he got swept up in a romance. It's not illegal to be persuasive." Her eyes met mine, cold now. "Calculating, you'd destroy your own son's name in court to try to hurt me. Go ahead. You'll look paranoid, vindictive." I didn't flinch. Neither did Milo. Because Wendell's final message had just arrived, and it confirmed everything we feared. Just as Lacey reached for her purse, poised to make a graceful exit, the door swung open behind her. Thomas stood there, composed but steely-eyed, holding a thin folder in his hand. "I thought I should join the tea," he said, voice calm, "especially since it concerns my firm." Lacey turned to him with practiced warmth. "Thomas, you can stop," he said. "The equity transfer was never finalized. The paperwork was incomplete, unsigned. Milo changed his mind yesterday." She blinked but quickly recovered. "Then it's a misunderstanding." "No," I said, rising from my seat. "It's a pattern." I opened my phone and tapped twice, then turned the screen toward her. A shaky but clear video began to play, filmed through a trellis by small, nervous hands. Lacey, dressed in white, stood near the garden shed, handing a folder to the man in black. Her voice was quiet but audible. "It's all in here. He trusts me now." We move after the signing. Lacey's mouth tightened. She looked to Milo, then to me. No smile now, just calculation. Milo pulled out his phone. "I'm calling the sheriff." She stood slowly, fixing her posture. "On what charge, mistrust? You'll only embarrass yourselves." But as she reached for the doorknob, 2 patrol cars pulled into the gravel circle outside the main house. Thomas stepped forward, speaking low. We just received confirmation. There was a breach in our system, facial recognition login, remote keystroke mapping. They accessed projections, investor contacts, and private strategy models. You didn't just fool a man, Miss Neves. You tried to steal from a company. For the first time, her expression faltered. Her jaw clenched, lips pressing to a hard line. The officers didn't arrest her, not then, but they asked her not to leave the estate. Her name was already flagged on an FBI watch list. She didn't argue. She just turned and walked away, slower than I expected, head high, but hands trembling. Milo stood by the window, unmoving. When I touched his arm, he didn't pull away. We'll need to talk to Nia, he said quietly. She might have saved all of us. It was 3 weeks before I saw Milo again. He came by on a quiet Sunday wearing jeans and a t-shirt I hadn't seen since before the engagement. His shoulders looked lighter, his eyes softer. Nia ran ahead of him into my arms like nothing had happened, and maybe in her world, nothing had. Just a puzzle she helped solve. We sat in the kitchen, with tea and orange scones, the way we always used to. He didn't apologize, not directly. But he looked me in the eye and said, "You were right to ask the hard questions." Even when I didn't want to hear them, I nodded because there was nothing left to prove. The annulment had gone through quietly. The equity gift had been rescinded without a courtroom. Thomas was stabilizing slowly, and Wendell had sealed every digital leak before anything permanent was lost. She was ready to empty us, Milo said. Every one of us. I still can't believe it. You don't have to, I said. You caught her before she could. No, he said, glancing toward the living room where Nia was coloring on the rug. She did. When Nia finished her picture, she brought it over and laid it in my lap. This one's for you, Grandma. It was simple. A house with a red roof, a tree with birds, a little girl in a purple dress holding hands with 4 tall figures, all of us smiling. No shadows, no secret guests standing in the background. I felt my throat tighten as I smoothed the paper with my palm. You drew us together, I whispered. She nodded. It's our house now. Nobody else gets in unless they tell the truth. I kissed her forehead, holding the drawing close. In the end, it hadn't been the confrontation, the records, or even the threat of arrest that saved us. It had been a child's drawing, a whisper, a gut feeling no one dismissed. Sometimes the smallest voice is the one that saves the whole house.